Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Immigration Uncovered. I'm your host, James Pittman, co-founder of DocketWise. This is our DocketWise sponsored podcast where we dive deep into the dynamic world of immigration law, shedding light on the latest developments, cutting-edge practice management strategies, and the transformative impact of legal technology. I'm thrilled to be with you on this exciting journey as we empower immigration practitioners with invaluable insights and explore the intricate intersection of law and society. My guest today is Guy Sakalakis, an expert in legal marketing. Guy, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
James, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Guy, let's start off by just having you introduce yourself and tell me about your experience in legal marketing. I mean, I know that you are a lawyer by background, but is this something you came to after a career in practice, and did you have formal training in marketing? How did this all unfold that you got to this point?
Great question. So, I was a plaintiff's lawyer at a small firm. This is back in 2004, 2005-ish. And as a young lawyer, I was tasked with going out and figuring out how we could use the internet. And the internet was a bit different back in 2005. I think social media was much more nascent in general. And so, I did some research and came back with a bunch of options, talked to a lot of different lawyers, even, outside the firm. And the sentiment was, I don't think that a lot of people are going to use the internet and this stuff to hire lawyers. And I was like, this just doesn't sound right to me. And so that was really the impetus for starting the journey and founding Attorney Sync. My partner and I eventually founded it in 2008. I started off as a computer science major, if you can believe that, but coding was a lot different back then too. And I decided I didn't really want to pursue that career. So that's what took me to law school. And then I practiced for a very short period of time, founded the business. And we've been helping lawyers navigate the web and marketing ever since. And no, to answer your question, I never had formal marketing training. I will say there's a lot of overlap between marketing and, in my opinion, trial law, because at the end of the day, you're marshaling evidence of your good reputation is the way I like to talk about it. So
You're making the argument.
Making the argument.
There you go. So, Guy, how do marketing strategies for law firms differ from marketing strategies for other industries as a broad proposition?
Sure. So the most obvious one is rules of professional conduct, right? So lawyers are governed by ethical obligations that most other industries don't have. And so there are some constraints on how lawyers can market themselves. The more nuanced answer, though, I think that's a little more interesting is, and this varies from practice area to practice area. So you talk about immigration, for example. Some people, and lawyers forget this, everybody wants what the marketing people call like the lower funnel business lookup, direct response types of clients, right? So they're looking for immigration lawyer near me. That's high intent. It's low funnel. You don't have to do a lot of convincing because the person's already looking for an immigration lawyer. Now, on the other hand, though, there are a lot of people that are just doing research. They don't even know that you might need a lawyer. They don't know anything about visas or anything, and they're just kind of exploring their options. And so, I think that when people think about marketing a law firm, the more that you can focus on helping educate and helping your audience understand the process and the pitfalls, and then guiding them down the path of like, here's why you might even consider needing a lawyer. And then two, and once you're past that stage, really the most important thing is, why are you the right lawyer? And so I do think, that applies more to professional services in general, but that's different than, say, if you're selling like shoes or something, where people are just like, hey, looking for this particular type of shoe. Maybe they already have a shoe in mind. But marketing professional services and legal services more specifically is a little bit different in terms of, you've got to, back to that, you got to marshal that evidence of your reputation. Why are you uniquely qualified to help me with my life legal issue and solving my life legal problem?
So what I hear you saying is that the target audience is specific and well-defined. I mean, you're not just selling a generic consumer product, you're selling professional service. And there's often an educational aspect to it where you have to sort of educate the consumer a little bit as to why they may need your services. Now, law encompasses so many different fields. I mean, if we, let's say with immigration law, because that's our focus, like you said, oftentimes people will be Googling general information about immigration, but you can have content out there that's educational in nature and yet draws them to the conclusion that you as lawyer are the appropriate solution for your problem. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that to add on to that, this is another part that I think lawyers miss a lot because, again, it's everybody loves this idea of, I keep calling direct response, but that it's, search, click, call, hire. But to your point, a lot of people, it's about just, yes, you got to build awareness to be in their consideration set at all. But a lot of these decisions, whether to even pursue immigrating or whatever, the solution to whatever life legal issue that the potential client has, it really requires a lot of nurturing. It requires a lot of education. It requires trust building. It requires expertise demonstration. And so it's not a one-call close all the time. A lot of times it's a lot more about developing that relationship, getting them to subscribe to get more updates from you, to follow you on social media. Maybe you have a podcast or a newsletter, but those kind of techniques are much more effective because, again, it's not I'm ready to buy a shoe. I'm looking, maybe I'm shopping on price or I already have the shoe picked out. This is a lot more, I've got a lot of questions I need answered. A lot of, this can be very emotional. Most life legal contexts, people are scared to even talk to lawyers. They haven't had to interface with a lawyer frequently in their life. And so there's a lot of emotion involved. And so I think, the lawyers, especially as we start talking about technology and some of the things that even AI might be able to automate, the human element to professional services is so important to the client development process.
Let's talk about like a general methodology. So how would you go about, creating a marketing plan tailored to, let's say, an immigration law firm's goals and objectives?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head because I took the words out of my mouth, which is question one is, what are your goals and objectives, and how are you coming up with those goals and objectives? So it's very easy to say something like, my goal is to be the leading immigration lawyer in the United States in the next year. Oh, that sounds great. Then the next step is like, how are you going to do that? And so aligning what your goals and objectives are with, your budget, the resource allocation that you're going to deploy to it. Because that's the other part too, is that you only have two resources, in my view. You either have your time that you can spend on marketing and you have money you can spend. And so, what is the resource allocation and then how are you going to deploy those resources? And so building that plan really depends on that. And so if you had to twist my arm, like, well, what is a reasonable, goal or objective? It's very hard to say, and it varies, based on like where firms are in their growth process. But I usually like to try to talk about things or couch in terms of a growth number that's benchmarked against your existing, revenue number or fee number, and then talk about like your resource deployment against that. And so then that will tell you a lot about what tactics and strategies you're going to deploy too, because an easy example is like, if I need the phone to start ringing today, well, guess what? Branding and SEO and, the longer, the reputation development, getting reviews and stuff, that stuff doesn't happen overnight. Whereas like, you can turn an ad campaign on tomorrow. If you're doing it well, we'll start to generate leads or potential clients more quickly. And so anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying that, it really depends, but we always try to start with what does success look like? What are the objectives we're trying to find or trying to hit up front? And then start to talk about how you're going to build a plan that's supported by the resources, both time and money, that are needed to hit those objectives.
So now, broadly speaking, what would be the marketing channels that have proven most effective for law firms? And if you can, sort of filter that, and which ones you think would be most effective for immigration law firm?
Sure. So I'm going to bucket into two big buckets. So the first one I'm going to call like the non-brand acquisition bucket. So that's like people that are, searching for immigration lawyer, or, they're searching for a specific visa. And I kind of gave away the answer, but search is extremely powerful. And the reason is because search has intent. Like, this is why Google makes so much money off of intent-based ads, because when people are looking for something specific and you can get your message in front of them, search satisfies that intent, that demand for information. It's very, very effective for client acquisition. Search ads also. Now, it's very easy to open a Google Ads account and to start bidding on keywords. it's very difficult, or can be very difficult, to manage a Google Ads campaign to a target cost per acquisition of a client with a target number of clients in mind. But search off the top of my head for non-brand acquisition is really tends to be the most powerful. On the other side, in the brand bucket, social media is extremely effective. So social media, and when I say brand, I'm thinking more about being out there in front of the right audience with messaging, but there's no intent, it's interruption based advertising. So a lot of people on Facebook, they're not there to go and find an immigration lawyer, right? Okay. They're there because they want to interact with their friends. Now, sure, they're going to they might consume immigration content. They might be participating in private immigration groups, and so they have an affinity for, maybe they're interested in the topic, but they're not there, doing search in the same way. Now, there is some overlap here. There's all of the lines between all this stuff start to blur really quickly, because another example is there are people that are searching for information on immigration on social media, and they want to hear from people in their networks that they're connected to, because there's built-in social proof and trust with people that they already know. But it's not the same kind of that search intent that search has. But those two, off the top of my head, if you ask me right now, what are two really effective ways to, especially when you're talking about immigration, because out of all this, before you even get to channels, understanding your target audience, that's the number one thing. And the same way we talk about it in personal injury, I'll ask a personal injury lawyer, well, who's your target audience? Well, anybody who's hurt in my state. And I'm like, is that really true? And then it turns out it's no, it's medical malpractice for the specific type of malpractice claim that they're trying to pursue. And I'm like, okay, that's a much more segmented audience. Same thing for immigration, right? It's well, anybody trying to immigrate to the United States, it's is that right? Or is it a certain type of visa seeker that you're trying to support? Is it people that are trying to migrate from a specific country? Do they speak a specific language? And so audience identification is hugely important before you even start talking about channels and where you're going to start deploying resources. It's really about understanding that audience, what's keeping them up at night, where they are in the world, what language they're speaking, how they're using a variety of different resources to be able to get answers to their questions.
Okay. So let's say, for example, we've identified our target audience. Let's say our target audience is highly qualified professionals who want to immigrate to the U.S. Let's say we want to specialize maybe in academics and doctors, things like that. What would be next?
So then I would start figuring out where those people are having conversations, right? So where are they going to get information about the immigration process? Now, I think search is a part of that conversation. Their current professional community is probably part of that. There probably are other, I don't know if there's a specific profession that you're talking about, but say it's people that are in tech, they want to immigrate here to take a tech job or something. There are going to be all sorts of places, communities, that people talking about this. And so I would go research those. I'd go research the forums that they're on, right? There's professional forums that people are going to have these conversations. There's probably Slack communities. There's probably private Facebook groups. And so you can go start researching, start looking, Google's a great research tool. Go start looking at where these people are having those conversations, and then join those communities. And the idea there is not to join and raise your hand and say, hey, look at me, I'm an immigration lawyer, I can help you. It's to start building those connections, building those relationships. Maybe they have a specific question. Maybe they're just there to get to know somebody, but participating in those communities and start, just like you would do at an in-person networking event, you start to build those relationships. And I think that really should be the cornerstone before you get into spending a bunch of money on trying to do that non-brand acquisition. I would start to build those relationships, because again, you're going to learn more about the audience, connecting with those people. And it also is going to give you a ton of information about content ideation. So when you listen to the issues that they're trying to solve, it's going to inspire you to say, hey, you know what? I know the answer to that question. I'm going to go create a short video about this, and then I would go post that on, LinkedIn and post it in the groups, because, helping people solve those problems and getting answers to those questions is one of the best ways to start to establish yourself, build trust, and position yourself as an expert.
Now, when you're working with a firm, what role are you playing? Are you just advising them what to do? Are you collecting and analyzing the data? How do you go about working with a firm? Are there some law firms that you think don't need marketing professionals? They can do all this on their own, or
Our clients engage us in a variety of different ways. Some will come to us and say, "Hey, look, we've got a marketing team in house, but I'd love for you to come in and kind of like look over their shoulder, see what they're doing." A lot of times we'll say, "Yeah, they're doing a great job, and there's not much other value we can add." Sometimes it might be tweaking. Other firms will come to us and say, "Hey, look, I'm just getting started. I don't have any clue of what I'm doing, and we need you to handle, everything from website creation to media management, reputation management, and the whole nine." So, and we have a team. It's not just, to be clear, it's not just me, because I don't scale, and everything in between. And so, my view has always been to try to tailor our services to what the firm needs versus saying, we've got a lot of our competitors will have like gold, silver, and bronze packages, and like here's what you get, and it's very like deliverable focused. Everybody's got their own approach to this stuff. But for me, because it varies so much from firm to firm, and the personalities and the economics of firms are different from firm to firm. And so we've tried to come in to support them where they need it. Some lawyers are really great at recording video and they're great on camera, or they're great writers. Others are like, what, I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just want to practice law. I don't want to do the marketing side of things. And so we try to support them where they need it. And some will come to us and will say, "Hey, you know what? We're just not the right fit, or you're not at a stage where, this is more like do yourself. Here are some blog posts." And so to answer your second question, they're like, "No, I don't think every law firm needs outside marketing support. It just really depends on what the lawyers at the firm love to do, and whether or not that the value, because again, if they're going to spend time on it, they should be regularly analyzing the value of their time spent on client development versus the value of their time spent serving clients, and that's not the same for everybody."
So let's go back to our example. So let's assume that we've identified our target audience and we are engaging in the communities where our target audience resides online. What do we do next?
So, I'd start sharing expertise. Maybe there's a legislative update, or maybe there's a bill pending, so you might start talking about like how this might impact it. So step one is, this is like old school stuff. It's like know, like, and trust. The first thing is they got to know who you are, right? No one can hire you if they don't know who you are. The like and trust part comes after that. And so if you're there and you start to build relationships, it's starting to publish in ways that it's going to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. I think sharing stories, that marketing term, David Meerman Scott, would be newsjacking, right? So you're talking about like stuff that's going on in the news. You might talk about high profile immigration stories. You might talk about what's going on in Congress. You might talk about some of the macro trends in immigration and immigration reform and that kind of stuff. But it shows that like, hey, I eat and sleep and live and breathe this stuff every day. That's what people are going to start to gravitate towards expertise. And again, we're talking about really one dimension of this whole plan, which would be to be a part of those conversations online that people are talking about, and going to the places that they want to consume this information. I think going and answering questions on forum sites also is really valuable. I was just, even in preparation for this episode, I was just doing some basic research on just immigration forums, immigration news sites, starting to collect those resources and then participate in the conversations that are happening there, building a relationship with a journalist who might cover immigration, especially in the context that serves the community that you're trying to represent. Because guess what? Then you're going to get media attention. People will actually like interview you and say, "Oh, hey, I noticed that you were talking about this online. I'd love to have you get a quote for you for an article I'm doing," stuff like that.
So this all goes into becoming a thought leader. This is our content marketing. Now, two questions. What would we be doing the non-content marketing at the same time, working on our SEO and things like that at the same time, or what? Are we trying to get our name out there first when we're first getting started?
So if you're just getting started, the 80% should be on the thought leadership, building relationships also with other lawyers as well. Because I think professional referrals are probably going to be, hopefully are going to be a big part of what you're doing early on. Because again, I always think about it this way, like where you are in your growth continuum, that's what's going to dictate your strategy. And so if you're brand new, you don't have a reputation of being an amazing immigration lawyer. And so you're going to have to spend a lot more of your resource, your time capital, and assuming that you're not spending a lot of money because you're just getting started, on starting to build those relationships to start getting the word out of who you are and who you're trying to help. But I always say this too, those longer term seeds, you're alluding to the SEO stuff and the non-brand direct response stuff. you can't wait on that stuff, right? Because those are like, it's kind of like gardening. Like you got to plant those seeds early on, but maybe that's 20% of your time. And so I always say, look, it's going to be a combination of both of those things at the same time. It's just a matter of like how much you're doing of each of those things. So I would still be, having a website that an owned media asset, your own website. I'm big on WordPress because you can take it anywhere. You're not beholden to proprietary system. Not that I have anything against proprietary. I say that and people always get upset about that, but I'm very much like long-term. It's like be on WordPress, get a solid hosting environment. I'm partial to WP Engine, start publishing. There's all sorts of public resources. The government puts out all sorts of resources. Write about the different types of visas that you want to help people navigate, like all the information that's on the government websites. You can recreate that in your own words on your own site. And, making sure it's on a technically sound infrastructure. But, the basics of SEO, it's not that complicated. I mean, I say that, and again, I live this stuff, so I maybe probably shouldn't say that. But, you spend a weekend learning about some of the basics, the meta tags and site architecture, and you can be up and running with a well-optimized site pretty easily now. That's what's really, truly amazing about it, too, is the technology costs have gone down to, basically zero in terms of hosting and the actual publishing of content online, which is great. It really democratizes your ability to gain share of voice early on.
Well, let's talk about branding a little bit more and go into a little bit more depth. So, I mean, what role does branding play? Like, what are the different aspects of branding? When we say branding, what are the different what falls under the penumbra of branding, and what role does that play in the success of your marketing efforts?
I kind of think about branding as really twofold. It's kind of reputation and positioning. So I think reputation is the easiest for lawyers to wrap their heads around because it's like, this is what I'm known for. I'm known for, whether maybe it's a specific clientele that you serve, or maybe you have a competitive advantage because you're more tech savvy, or you have the ability to do something that some of your competition doesn't have. But it kind of bleeds over into the positioning aspect. And when we think about positioning, we really think about both vertical and horizontal positioning. So I'm going to give you some examples of good and bad. So bad positioning would be like, I'm an immigration lawyer. Well, you've just commoditized yourself, right? There are lots of immigration lawyers. There's nothing special about what you're saying there. You're only slightly better than just saying you're a lawyer because you put immigration in front of it. On the other hand, good positioning that would have vertical and horizontal positioning would be like, we only do this specific type of visa for for immigrants that are from this specific country that speak this specific language. And if you think about that across the continuum, you go from, there's a lot of lawyers that do that to there's very few lawyers that do just this thing. And if you can become known as the expert on that very specific thing, then people are going to come to you when that specific issue comes up. You stand out in the crowd. Now, people always say this too. It's like, well, that sounds great, but maybe there are only a certain number of potential clients in that pool. So haven't I just haven't I niched myself out of that? And positioning is not about saying that's all we do. It's just what you're leading with that you're known for, right? So you might take on a bunch of different clients from different countries, but the key is that the consistency of your positioning message is the same. So that when that question comes up, when that specific type of visa comes up or that specific type of immigration persona comes up, people are going to think of you as the person who does that, even though you do things beyond that. So that's kind of how I think about branding.
Okay. So besides your message and you're differentiating yourself from your competition, how about some of the other assets in branding? I mean, some of the tangible things like how your website looks and how it's designed and how you communicate with your clients and some of those other things. Do those play a role in branding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of those things go into, what I was putting under the reputation umbrella, right? So like, do you have a reputation for delivering excellent client service? Do you have a reputation for keeping your clients informed? Do you have a reputation for being accessible? Do you have a reputation for being, tech enabled or tech competent? And again, where those things overlap with the needs of your clients, that's where they're super valuable. Because, for example, if you don't have people or ways to communicate effectively in the same language as your potential client, that's going to hurt your quote unquote branding or your reputation, right? On the other hand, if you can communicate well with them, if you're available, maybe you have some automations in place or some tools in place that make it easier for them, that remove the friction from them communicating with you and keeping them informed about the process and the status of their application if they're applying. Those are all going to go towards, your quote unquote brand, or, the way I think about it is your reputation for delivering remarkable client service.
Let's ask this question then. How do you suppose you're doing content marketing and you're getting good at it. How do you take viewers from your content pieces and turn those into leads?
Yeah, another great question. So the first thing I think it's important for people to remember is it's not realistic to try to think that you're going to turn everybody that follows you or subscribes to your newsletter into a lead. And I say that because, I understand that conversion rate, right? We want to convert attention into paying clients. The problem is that I see a lot of lawyers in their desire to do that and to increase their conversion, they end up disenfranchising people that were otherwise following them. And then, it turns people off. And then your actual overall network shrinks because you took some marketing advice and now you're bombarding people with these messages and trying to convert them into clients. And they unsubscribe or they block you. They don't want to hear from you. And so I think for me, the key is to give people a lot of different options to raise their hand. So, and what I mean by that is, you give away a free ebook, or you give away, maybe you have some gated video content that people can raise their hand or subscribe to get. And then you make it easy for them to understand how they interface with you, right? How do they go? What's the hiring process look like? Do you prefer that they call you? What's your primary call to action? Do you offer paid consultations, free consultations? Make it very easy for people to understand how they can actually engage your services. And the other thing I always tell people too is think about ways you can break your services up. Are there ways to, provide some a la carte? Maybe there's a resource you can provide for them to get them started on their journey because they're not really ready to hire everything that it is that you do for them to solve that problem. And so the simpler that you make it for someone to raise their hand and request that you actually, represent them, the higher your conversion rate is going to be. And you're not going to disenfranchise those that just want to continue to receive, your updates, or, maybe it's other lawyers that follow you. Because they might be great referrals, or maybe it's other non-lawyer professionals that are just interested in the topic or are interested in you. They want to get updates from you, but they don't want to be sold to. I mean, no one likes being sold to, right? So you don't try to convert people who aren't ready to be sold to.
So how important is reputation management? We talked about building a reputation, but how about managing your reputation? I mean, how do you handle things like negative reviews? How do you get people to write positive reviews, and where should they put them?
So reputation management is really, really important. And this is the one. So even the lawyers that might be listening to this that are skeptical and they're like, all this SEO stuff and digital stuff's not my thing. The reason that it's really for everybody is because no matter how somebody hears about you, maybe it's a professional referral, an offline referral, people are going to go look you up online. And so when they search, when they type your name into Google, when they type your name into LinkedIn, to see information about you, what they find is going to play a role in whether they even decide to contact you in the first place. And so that's kind of how I think about the starting point for reputation management. So here's a few quick wins. First thing is Google Business Profile. So if you have a physical office location, this is Google's rules, not mine. I would definitely have a Google Business Profile, probably both an office location profile, and if you're certainly if you're a firm owner or a partner in the firm, a practitioner profile, because those are the assets that are going to rank most prominently for brand searches or searches on your name or your firm name, or if you're in a state that allows lawyers to operate under trade names. Those branded search queries, that's where people are going to go when they want to find information about you. And so I would start, and then the part of your question was, well, where should I send happy clients? That's where I would send most of my happy clients, is to my Google Business Profile to have them leave reviews. They've got a star rating system. You can also upload clients that are willing. You can do video testimonials, and you can upload those to Google Business Profiles. Those are very, very powerful in terms of validating your reputation for excellent client service and client experience. Let your clients sing your praises on those Google Business Profiles. I think the second place I'd be strongly considering sending people would be LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably more effective from a individual practitioner profile than from like a firm page. And LinkedIn has a recommendation feature built in. And so getting recommendations on LinkedIn, especially if you serve professionals that are trying to immigrate, because they're going to be looking at their professional network and a lot of them are going to be on LinkedIn. And so when you have that validation of like mutual connections who are saying, I hired this person to help me, or this person's an expert on this subject, or you have other immigration lawyers talking about, this is the lawyer that I would be hiring if I was going to immigrate to the U.S. That kind of stuff is really powerful. So how do you motivate more people to do that? Well, you got to improve the experience, right? If people are having a bad experience, they're going to be less likely to leave you a positive review. And like I say that, and everybody's focused on like, well, what's your system for getting more reviews on Google? And whatever, I don't care what system you use. I don't care. There's software that can support this, Birdeye, GatherUp, that can help nudge happy clients to leave reviews. But without the remarkable service, none of that stuff's going to help you. And so it starts with client service. Then it's about asking, and there's the better and worse ways to ask and timing. But a lot of times lawyers know you have a client who's like, you just changed my life. You just saved me. You just saved my family. What can I do to repay you? It's like, well, my firm lives and dies by referrals. And so if you'd be willing to say something nice about us, we'd be so grateful for you doing that. Happy clients, they want to do that stuff. And I would say Google Business Profile and LinkedIn is where I would start. And then the negative side of the house, first, and this lawyers don't like to hear this one too, but the first step is to like listen to what the negative review says. If it's a legitimate negative review from an unhappy client, go look at yourself in the mirror and ask why they had that experience. Now, again, I say that, and a lot of lawyers get frustrated by that, and you can't make all the people happy all the time, and that's true. And then it's like, take a breath and have empathy. And the best thing you can do when you get those negative reviews that are legitimate is to say, look, I'm really sorry you had that experience. If there's anything that we can do, and this is case by case, it's not a blanket statement. So I don't want you to go out and go respond to all these negative reviews sometimes it's better just to let sleeping dogs lie. But if it's an opportunity for you to at least respond, show some empathy, because you might not convince that person to take their review down or to change their opinion, but you know what you're doing? You're talking to the next person who looks you up. And it's like, look, people buy stuff on Amazon all the time that doesn't have only 5-star reviews. In fact, when you're shopping, usually people will sort by the negative reviews to see, but they realize that, look, sometimes there's just a misalignment, or sometimes someone had an unreasonable expectation. And so how you respond to those negative reviews, and whether you respond to them at all, that's a much bigger indicator of how much you care about your own professional reputation and your next clients. And so, on balance, and a lot of these review studies that these big companies put out, they show that a mixed positive and negative reviews actually leads to consumers concluding that these are more authentic than if you have 10,000 just 5-star reviews, because then they appear to be fake, right? So it's another something to think about.
So you mentioned it a little bit, but the concept of storytelling, how would you incorporate storytelling into your marketing to engage your potential clients?
Yeah, so a couple examples of that. I mean, I think one is like the origin story, right? So like, why did you start doing what you're doing? And some people have a great origin story. I mean, in the immigration context, if you're an immigrant yourself and you're telling that story and how it was such a life-changing event for you that it drove you into helping others, that's a great story that you should be telling. Everybody's got their own story, but the why you do what you do, I think, is a really important story to tell. It puts a human face to navigating a system that can feel a lot less than human oftentimes. I think having your clients that are willing to tell their stories, getting those stories out there. But it always comes back to the same thing is like, how can you differentiate yourself through the stories that you're telling? What is it that you do that other people can't do? Right? What can't be replicated? And who you are, your experience, sharing your experiences, that's the stuff that your competitors can't create, that because they're not their stories. That's why it's so effective, because you're sharing your experience, you're sharing your specific knowledge, you're sharing your clients' experiences. And so highlighting those stories, maybe it's interviewing a client, maybe it's showing some of the good works you're doing in the community besides just representing clients in immigration context. I know a lot of lawyers, they'll highlight works they're doing in their community, charity causes that they're passionate about. And again, not just like, hey, we donated money to this cause, but, we actually went out and participated in furthering whatever the cause is. but showing that you're actually invested in the community that you're serving goes a really, really long way to telling that story of like why you're doing what you're doing, and that you actually care about your clients. Because again, when people are hiring you and when they're referring you, it's about, do they trust you? Do they trust you and do they like you? And so the more that you can share about who you are and what you stand for, the better that they're going to have a sense of why they should be choosing you or referring you to their friends and family.
I want to talk about our lead funnel and lead nurturing and follow-up and all of that. But before I do that, let's just have some fun. There are a lot of misconceptions that I think, lawyers, especially new lawyers, might have about marketing. So I thought of some misconceptions that I've heard before, and I want to present them to you and have you react to them. So the most obvious one, we don't hear this very often, and I don't hear it very often anymore, but marketing's not necessary for law firms.
That's my favorite one.
Oh, okay. All you need is your reputation and word of mouth.
Yeah, and so usually the way that one comes is like you said, we don't need marketing. We just do great work for clients, right? All we do is just focus on great work for clients. And I got to tell you, there are more lawyers per capita in the United States than anywhere else in the world. It is competitive. It can, certain practice areas, it can be cutthroat. It's much nastier than a lot of people want to admit. Everybody thinks lawyers, like, it's all very above board. And I see great trial lawyers. I mean, we talk to great trial lawyers all the time, like some of the best lawyers in the country. And if you don't get the word out, if you're not doing things to help spread that, and the other thing that's kind of baked into that is, I can't tell you how many times we'll be working with lawyers who have, they've had a lot of clients in the past, and we'll do surveys or we'll interview former clients, and they'll forget what the lawyer even does. And so it just goes to show you that, like, you've got to be regularly communicating the value of your services, even to the people who know you, let alone the people who don't know you. And I'll even say the counterpoint. There are plenty of lawyers that they're right. They're not trying to grow. When we go back to the top of the order here, when we were talking about the beginning, their objective is not to scale their law firm. They don't want to grow. They can just keep their head down, do great work. They get enough consistent referrals that it's, supporting the lifestyle they want to lead. And I think that's great. And so again, I can't say that every single lawyer needs to do all the marketing stuff that I'm talking about. But what happens is that as you incrementally want to grow, it gets harder and harder to get that next client, to grow your share of voice, to grow your reputation. That gets harder and harder. And then even if you don't want to grow, this is what I always tell people that don't want to grow, your referrals, like, you might have a bunch of referrals ebb and flow. You might have a bunch right now. But if your regular referral sources dry up for whatever reason, you don't have the same regularity and consistency and reliability and predictability for your business if you're not doing some kind of marketing, because marketing will create much more predictable results over time than just doing great work. Doing great work is necessary, but not sufficient, often, is how I describe it.
And in that same vein, let's bring out our next misconception. Marketing is just advertising, or marketing's the same thing as advertising.
So I always say this. That's not true. But what I like to say is marketing is just communicating the value of your service. Like, that's all it is. It's just communicating. It's just talking about what you do, why you do it, who you help. It's not just you communicating, right? It's your clients communicating. It's testimonials. It's reviews. It's speaking. But every engagement, you might be in an elevator next to somebody and someone's like, hey, what do you do? And when you open your mouth to tell them what you do, guess what? You're marketing, right? And advertising is paid media placements, right? Advertising is a very specific type of way to get the word out about your firm. By the nature of it, it's paid. You just pay money. Marketing, though, is every time you talk about what you do, why you do it, who you help, tell a story, that's marketing. And so, yes, those are definitely not the same thing.
So for the record, marketing involves branding, it involves content creation, involves search engine optimization, social media presence, thought leadership, client experience, and more. Comprehensive marketing strategy has various elements.
Everything that has to do with communicating anything about your firm, I call that marketing.
How about this one? Marketing's too expensive.
Well, That's a great question. I always tell people, I'm like, marketing is only, and advertising too, it's only as expensive as its failure to generate the result that you're trying to get it to generate, right? So marketing's really an investment. And as we talked about earlier, there are two resources that go into marketing. Yes, money is one of those, but time also can be an investment. And so, I love people that will say like, oh, well, all my marketing's free, right? I just do my own stuff. I spend time. I don't spend a single dollar. And I'm like, every minute you spend has a cost attached to it. So you can call it time or money. It's still a resource deployment. But the expensive part is it's only expensive if it's not producing the result that you want it to produce, because then it becomes a cost. Otherwise, it's an investment, right? If you put money in your bank account and you have interest growing, that's not a cost. That's not an expense. That's an investment that you're making. You're going to deploy that resource in a way to try to generate a return. And so, but I say that, and I don't mean to be, surreptitious about it. The truth is that you don't have to spend a single dollar to do marketing, right? As long as you can get online and communicate with people, you don't even get online. You can go walk down your street, and it's just the time that you're spending. It doesn't cost anything. Now, let's also not kid ourselves, because people might be sitting there rolling their eyes as I say this. You want to rank for a competitive query in Google, a high volume, low funnel, high converting search term. That can get extremely expensive because it requires all the things that go into doing that: the content production, the link building, the technical aspects of like making sure your site's performing well, the conversion path, the tracking, the nurturing. That stuff can get expensive, especially if you're going to hire people to do it if you're not going to do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. How about this next misconception? Marketing and ethics don't mix. Marketing could compromise my ethical obligation.
Yeah, right. Well, I always like to go back to Bates, right? Like the Supreme Court ruled that lawyers have a right to commercial speech a long time ago. And so it's the devil's in the details of how you actually do it. Marketing can compromise. It's very easy to market yourself in a way that can violate the rules of professional conduct. I can show you tons of examples of it, but it's not necessary. And in fact, the best marketing, it doesn't even get near broaching the ethical boundaries, because again, the best marketing isn't about trying to hard sell people or mislead them or using superlatives that you can't back up. It's about telling your stories, sharing your experiences. And of course, that when you're sharing your experiences, you still have to be mindful of your duties of confidentiality. You can't go blow confidences by through your marketing. But the best marketing doesn't even get close to violating the rules of professional conduct. And so, yes, that's definitely a myth that marketing equals bad ethics. Now, I'll tell you, though, I say that, and I run into lawyers all the time that they're like, yeah, you can't, marketing is unethical. And I'm like, and really when we start to have those conversations and I dig a little deeper, it's usually because they've had a bad experience with marketing people, and they've been misled to do something that they probably shouldn't have done, or they see a competitor. That's usually where it comes from, is they see a competitor doing something that runs afoul of the rules, and they say, "Oh, that's bad marketing stuff." And so, I always tell people, I'm like, my mom's so proud of me because I wear the two titles of ambulance chaser and SEO spammer, because that's I've been a plaintiff's lawyer and an SEO, but that's all perception stuff, right? The devil's in the details and the execution and how you do it.
We talked about this one a little bit. Let's go a little deeper. Negative feedback is harmful. I'm afraid of negative feedback. So some firms might avoid seeking feedback because of fear of negative comments. But what should you actually be doing with your negative feedback?
Yeah, and I'm going to quote, I had the good fortune, Rich Barton, who has founded a lot of companies, but he was on the board of Avvo before it sold, also on the board of one of the creators of Zillow and a couple other companies. But he was at a conference, this was years ago. It was one of Avvo's Avvocating conferences. And his thesis was, if it can be rated, it will be rated. And so to the lawyers that are scared and they don't, they're like, this stuff it's scary to get a negative review. Let me tell you, there are so many lawyers right now that are just like, put their head in the sand. They don't want to participate online. And guess what? People have gone out and left negative reviews, and they don't even know, because they've taken the, I'm not going to look at it. And so I can't tell you how many times we'll go and do research. Someone will come to us and say, hey, I'm interested in exploring And I'm like, you have a bunch of really nasty reviews online. And they're like, I had no idea. And the impact of that is so devastating. I mean, we've seen TV advertising on the other side of the coin, TV advertising lawyers who are driving a ton of brand awareness. And you go and search on their name and their Google business profile has a bunch of negative reviews. And so they're spending money to spread the word that they don't have a great reputation for client service. And so you can't ignore it. I mean, that's the thing, is that someone can go leave a review. You probably have a Google business profile in many cases, even if you don't claim it. You have an Avvo profile, even if you don't participate. Someone can go register a domain of your name.com and write a bunch of nasty stuff about you, and it will rank for searches on your name. So it's kind of like being like, I'm just going to ignore like what's going on in my office. Like, you can't. It's like, it's a part of it. You got to, at the very least, you should be monitoring what's being said about you online. There's a bunch of different tools for that. There's, they call them social listening tools, anywhere from like Google Alerts all the way to tools like Mention. But basically, they can notify you when something's written about you or written about your law firm online. You got to be a part of that conversation to protect your reputation.
Absolutely. Well, those are the misconceptions that I came up with. I want to talk about the lead funnel, but before that, let's just talk a little bit more about the actual website experience, like a lawyer website experience. What are the aspects or things that you think go into making an excellent user experience on a lawyer website? I mean, should it be mobile compatible? Should it, how fast should it load? I mean, what are your top must-haves?
You had two of them. So the buzzword there is responsive design, right? So no matter what device someone pulls up your website on, it should respond to that device. So people that aren't familiar with this language, if you pull up your website on your phone and you have to pinch and swipe to read it, that means it's not responsive, right? It should, the experience that it delivers should respond to the environment. So your website should reformat itself, whether it's on a desktop, an iPad, a phone. You mentioned speed. Speed is extremely important. We could do a whole thing on benchmarking speed, but safe to say that if it's not loading in about a second or so, people aren't going to stick around. I mean, how many people are listening? You can ask yourself, do you sit around and wait for slow web pages to open? No, you don't. You go back to Google and find another website. And I think it's also important to note on the speed factor that just because it loads fast on your device doesn't mean it's loading fast for the first time on other people's devices. And so there are all sorts, you can go to, there's speed, if you just serve like website speed tests, there's all sorts of free tools that you can use, but it's important for people to know that just because it loads fast on your phone, remember, if you come to your website a lot, your device is storing a bunch of the information and files from your phone or from your site. And so it can load fast on the third, fourth, fifth, 10th time, even if it's not loading fast on the first time. And, reliable hosting environment is an important one there. Beyond those two that you named, I'm going to put this all under the umbrella of reducing the friction to contact. So, lawyers love this idea of like, well, people that want to hire me are going to find a way to get a hold of me. So I want to guide them to this one experience, like fill out a web form or fill out this long intake form. I mean, you're shooting yourself in the foot. There are plenty of people that are ready to hire you, but they're not ready to fill out a 50-question intake form on your website, or they don't want to fill out a web form at all. So make it very obvious and easy for them to understand how to contact you if they've got more questions. I mean, to me, phone numbers is a no-brainer. People still want to operate on phone numbers, but give people options. Not everybody wants to call. Some people want to text. Some people might be willing to use a chat interface. Some people might want to email you, and so provide them the means to do that. But reduce the friction, and then clarify the calls to action. Like who you help, what is it that you do, what is it that you're really good at doing, what makes you unique, so that it motivates them to do that. Like get that positioning stuff in there. But those are kind of like the biggies, right? Fast, responsive, reduce friction to contact, and then demonstrate your expertise, your positioning, tell your stories. I think video content on your site is very valuable. They're like the video medium for communicating your expertise as a professional service provider really can't be beat. The written word's great, but it doesn't do the same kind of humanization, put a face to you, who you are, why you do what you do, the emotional side of things. I think that's really important. Another one too, if you're serving people in other countries that speak different languages, make sure the technical aspects of your site are going to serve your content up in their language. I can't tell you how many times people just assume like, oh, they could just translate it. And it's like, no, it's not exactly how it works. And especially from an SEO standpoint, people don't realize that there are different versions of Google in different countries, and the language matters a lot. So you can go research like international SEO technical aspects, but there are some things there to think about if you're going to serve a global audience.
You mentioned the chatbot. I think, automating things with the chatbot is a fantastic idea. And the technology, particularly now in the age of AI, to use the chatbot to gain, the contact information of potential leads is really a no-brainer, and is something is really worth doing. I mean, there's an excellent one we at DocketWise integrate with, an excellent one, Yotango Bot. I'll just make a plug for that one. But that is a English and Spanish language chatbot. But there's others, and it just makes it so effortless. So really having, multiple ways that they can contact you. How about a call to action on the website? I mean, do you need a call to action?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because again, this is a theme throughout this conversation and really in marketing in general, but you got to put yourself in the shoes of your potential client. And so a lot of times they don't know. They don't know if calling you is going to cost them $1,000, right? And so when I think of calls to action, it's really about educating them about like, what do you want? What's the next step for them to take, and making it clear if there are costs involved with that, but not all call to actions are consultations. Some calls to action might be download this resource or subscribe to this resource, but making it very clear what you want visitors to do and making it easy for them to understand like what goes into that decision. That's the real key. And again, it's not just, maybe your primary call to action that you have on every page globally is a consultation of some type, but give people other options, because not everybody, to use your funnel, kind of a little foreshadowing to talk about funnel, not everybody is at the end of the funnel. Some people are going to be in the top of the funnel. They're just doing research. They're not ready for a consultation, but they want to get more information from you. So make your calls to action guides to download, other resources, subscribe to a podcast, subscribe to a newsletter, subscribe to a tips list, subscribe to an immigration update email type of thing. Make it very clear what they're getting, what the terms are of that, what they can expect. I mean, so much of it, and lawyers know this, right? Because lawyers know in the context of client, and when they're actually serving clients, expectation setting is a huge part of delivering the service. It's the same thing when you're talking about marketing. Expectation setting through your calls to action and the resources that you're providing up front, so that there's not a misalignment between like, oh, I thought I was getting this and I'm actually getting this. That's what leads to negative reviews, because people, they're not getting what they expected. They don't think you did what you said you were going to do.
Should you have terms of service and a privacy policy on your law firm website?
I think so. I think that's good practice. And, I'm also big on a lot of disclaimers. Different states have different levels of regulation on what should be on lawyers' websites, but certainly disclaimers about confidentiality, disclaimers about attorney advertising. There's a variety. We could talk disclaimers, but disclaimers, terms of service, privacy policy, making sure you've got, this is another kind of table stakes things for your website security, is a TSL or a secured socket layer, so that when people are transmitting information through web forms, it's not subject to being intercepted. That's also a trust signal. So if you don't have an SSL, it's very people are going to look at that as a website that's not to be trusted. Google also, they'll show a warning if you don't have a secured socket layer protocol on your website. And so the security, all the security stuff, you should probably have a cookie disclaimer and a cookie opt-in. And you should also, depending on who you're serving, but if you're serving people that are either CASL in Canada or GDPR in the EU, make sure you have the proper disclaimers and opt-ins on your website for those as well.
Good advice. Very, very important advice. Let's talk about our funnel. So let's say we're capturing leads. I mean, give me a general methodology for how we're going to manage our leads funnel, and feel free to talk about what, your suggestions of what tech to use. I mean, should we be using Salesforce? Do you recommend others, and how do we go about monitoring? How do we go about conducting our follow-ups? How do we go about, assessing our SQLs, our MQLs, and so forth? And how do we make data-driven decisions on our leads?
Love this. This is like my favorite topic. So the first thing on software choice is, there are immigration lawyer specific platforms to choose from. I do think that those can be more intuitive there are certain practice areas that just lend themselves to a more specified feature set. Personal injury is another one where it's like, transactional firms, they have a bunch of tasks and processes that maybe are less specific, but like a personal injury off the top of my head, like there's very specific phases. And so if your software supports those phases in the immigration context, there are softwares that are specifically built for immigration lawyers. I would start exploring those. That being said, the trade-off oftentimes, and I also have to have a disclosure here. So I'm an investor and advisor to Lawmatics, which is a client relationship management tool for lawyers. It's not practice area specific. But the reason that I wanted to qualify all this is that oftentimes in legal tech, and you mentioned Salesforce, there are feature limitations because maybe the technology is a little bit newer, it's in beta. And so it's a trade-off between being like, okay, let's look at cost plus, is this technology going to be around? Is it funded? What features does it have that are essential to me? And then what are other systems in my practice that it needs to integrate with? So, obviously I already said I'm a big fan of Lawmatics. Lawmatics is, I think, got a lot of features that are good across practice areas, but the essential features to me are, one, it's got to have something that has like the built-in, what I'm going to call marketing automation stuff. So when someone fills out a form on your website or calls you, you're getting an automated like acknowledgement that you received the message, and it's like a MailChimp that you can subscribe to get updates. It also should have something that allows you to move prospects through a pipeline. So that's triggered based by stages. So I'm just going to tell you what we use because I think it will be helpful in kind of framing the conversation. Again, I'm not endorsing one specific. There's a lot of different ways to do this. We use ActiveCampaign at our business. An ActiveCampaign, it has marketing automation. It has a lot of nice reportings. I think reporting is another big thing. Lawmatics also has reporting. It should have something that will allow you to designate source because you want to be able to understand where your leads are coming from. So being able to say, this is from a Google Ads campaign, this is from organic search, this is from a referral, because that's the only way you're going to be able to manage and measure the effectiveness of your different marketing strategies. And then you should be able to have a pipeline. So you should be able to do trigger-based stages. So initial inquiry stage, or they're just subscribed to this specific campaign. And then once they raise their hand, then they turn into a marketing qualified lead. And then so I like to think about things in terms of, you said SQL. Conrad Salmon, who's my co-host at Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, who runs a competitor agency. He likes to talk about attorney qualified leads, which I really like that as well, or qualified consults, right? Once you have a qualified consult, I think like marketing's kind of done its job, and now it's in, quote unquote sales, even though I know it's a bad word for lawyers. But once you have somebody that's in your target audience, that's raised their hand to inquire about your services, they're looking for the type of services that you provide, then it's really on you as the lawyer to take them over the line and say, look, I got to demonstrate why I'm the right lawyer, and now's the right time for you to hire me and get your pricing right and your fees and get your retainer. But your CRM tools, so I'm always looking for, does it integrate with, we like CallRail for our call tracking, because I think, again, understanding phone calls, where phone calls are coming from, using dedicated tracking numbers in Google Business Profiles so that you can actually source phone calls, and a CRM that integrates with something like CallRail, that's really, really important. A lot of them have baked in web form tools, so you can actually like use the platform's web form tool to embed on your website. A lot of them are also moving towards having integrations with both the live chat and the virtual receptionist. That's another big thing we haven't talked a ton about, but I think is really, really important, is you're going to get to a stage where, if you're brand new, you probably are answering all the inbound calls. What happens when you're in court? What happens when you're sleeping? What happens when you're eating lunch? And lawyers will say, I handle all the calls, and someone that wants to get a hold of me will leave a message. They won't. They're going to move on to the next lawyer. And so whether it's a virtual receptionist, some firms will do round robin with like who's holding the baton of having to answer the phone, but you cannot miss phone calls. I can't tell you how many times we'll set up a call tracking system on a firm's website, and the firm will say, we handle all inbound calls. We don't miss any calls. And after a month or two of running that, they're like, you have 50% of your calls are being missed. Like, you're not even picking up the phone. It's really eye-opening for folks. So virtual receptionist, so someone who can answer the phone that integrates also, like we like Smith AI. There are a couple other virtual receptionist companies that are specific for law firms. Another side note, I would always be managing any kind of third-party vendor you're using. Secret shop them regularly. Like make sure that they're answering the phone you want the way that you want them to answer the phone. Make sure they're pronouncing your firm's name and your name correctly. Make sure they're doing the call routing regularly. Making sure like they're being friendly. That's another. The soft skills on intake is everything. If you set a bad expectation, like don't be surprised. Like I don't understand. We're spending all this money on Google Ads and we're not converting any calls. And then you listen to what's being said on the phone. And you're like, well, no wonder, because you're answering the phone law firm. Not friendly, not engaging, not any helping guide, or maybe you don't offer the language that your potential clients speak. Systems that can help you nurture prospective clients from their subscribers on your website to you're sending them a retainer to they're signed up. And then even beyond that, right? When we talk about client lifecycle management, it's another huge missed opportunity, but stay in touch with those clients afterwards. A lot of these systems, you can send out an automated email on their birthday and just wanted to check in and wish you a happy birthday. Just wanted to wish you a happy Labor Day. Maybe there are specific anniversaries in terms of like their immigration status that you just want to say, hey, it's been a year since you've, I helped you and you came to the country. Just wanted to check in and see how things were going. Nurturing, because guess what? Those people know other people that might need an immigration lawyer someday. And so staying in touch with them, staying top of mind with them, and don't assume that they're just going to remember you. They won't. I'm telling you, we see this time and time again. Happy clients. You'll call them up or send them a survey, and they'll be like, "Who are you talking about? Oh yeah, that lawyer that helped me immigrate to the country." And it's just the way that it is, and it's not going to happen for everybody. But the more that you can stay top of mind, you can deliver content, you can empathize, show your gratitude for their services. That's who people want to refer business to.
Gay, I mean, we could go on, and I want. I definitely want to have you back. I mean, we're getting to the end of the hour, but I definitely want to have you back because we really should go into all of the ways that automation can figure into this process, because the tools nowadays for automating this process have just become so sophisticated, and there's so much more available. And we can talk about, utilizing AI tools for generating your content and generating your follow-up emails and things like that. So I definitely would like to have you back for a continuation or part 2 of this discussion. How does that sound?
That sounds wonderful. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm so grateful that you had me on, and happy to do it again at your convenience.
Okay. Again, thanks very much. This has been Yitzhak Lakis, Attorney Sync, founder of Attorney Sync. And thank you very much for your time. And join us again for our next episode of Immigration Uncovered.